We begin the next session on cancer registries, and as I always say, it's a very important session, especially when it comes to cancer control and prevention. It's like, without data, it's like flying an aircraft without radar. So really, it's a very important session for all of us when it comes to cancer control and prevention and research. We have our facilitators currently on standby, Professor Max Parkin, who's an honorary research fellow at the University of Oxford. We have Eric Chokunonga, who's the registrar at the Zimbabwe National Cancer Registry, as well as Naomi Oyohe Oti, who's at the Accra Cancer Registry, where she's the registry manager. So, colleagues, once again, welcome, and I now hand you over to the facilitators to take the session away. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So as said before, registry is a very important category in cancer management or cancer care or for cancer control. We cannot do anything without data. We need to know where we are going and where we want to go, where we are coming from and where we want to go. And on that note, not to waste much time, we have our first presenter, who is in the person of Mr. Eric Chokunongo, also the registry manager for Zimbabwe Cancer Registry, has many years experience in cancer registry and has some publications to his credit. And without much ado, we want to invite Mr. Eric to give us the first presentation for the day. Eric, over.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay. Okay, is my screen visible now? Okay, is my screen visible now? Hello? Yeah. Okay. Yes, hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Eric. Please start.
All right. Okay.
We're waiting.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm presenting on the African Cancer Registry Network. So this is the network of cancer registries in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, the first slide. Next slide, please. Yes, cancer is a serious problem in sub-Saharan Africa. As you can see from this slide, which shows the estimated crude incidence rates of cancer in sub-Saharan Africa. In dark blue, we have countries with the highest cancer incidence. These are in North Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. So the countries with the highest rates in North Africa include Reunion, Mauritius, South Africa, Tunisia, and those in light blue are with low rates of cancer. Next slide, next. This is a famous a quote from Sir Richard Dole, and it was in the first volume of Cancer Incidence in 5 Continents. So among the available statistics for studying cancer, most valuable data are undoubtedly the rates obtained by recording the occurrence of every case of cancer over a specified period of time. So it's very important to have data on cancer. And in order to have good quality data, a cancer registry should be able to record each and every cancer case that occurs in its target population. Why do we need population-based cancer registries? A population-based cancer registry provides data to improve cancer care. So in order to come up with a cancer control plans, good cancer control plan, we need data, and these data are produced by cancer registries. So a cancer registry is an important source of data for cancer control programs. I'm now going to talk about the African Cancer Registry Network. The African Cancer Registry Network was officially inaugurated in 2012, and since then, on behalf of the International Agency for Research on Cancer and the African Cancer Registry Network, provides the activities as a regional hub or role with respect to cancer registry support in sub-Saharan Africa. So the African Cancer Registry Network, as of October 2021, is a membership of a membership of 35 population-based registries in 25 African countries. These are Benin, Botswana, Republic of Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Eswatini, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, and Eldred and Nairobi in Kenya, Malawi, Mali, Mauritius, in Mozambique we have Beira and Maputo, Namibia, Niger, and in Nigeria we have Abuja, Calabar, Ibadan, and Ekiti. Then Reunion, Rwanda, Seychelles, South Africa with the Eastern Cape and the National Cancer Registry. In Tanzania, we have Mwanza and Kilimanjaro. In Uganda, we've got Gulu and Kampala. And in Zambia and in Zimbabwe, Bulawayo and Harare. So our overall goal in the African Cancer Registry Network is to increase availability of information on cancer incidence, stage, and survival in the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, to allow systematic and rational development of cancer control programs. The immediate objectives can be assessed in terms of the number of countries meeting internationally accepted standards with respect to completeness and validity of data on cancer and mortality. So the African Cancer Registry Network provides is acting as a regional hub for the global initiative for cancer registry development program of the International Agency for Research on Cancer. The African Cancer Registry Network provides the activities of a regional hub role with respect to cancer registry support in Southern Africa. So it is providing technical and scientific support, including consultancies to countries, and also delivering tailored training in population-based cancer registration and use of data, advocating the cause of cancer registration in the region, and facilitating the setting up of associations and networks of cancer registries, and also coordinating international research projects and disseminating the findings. Okay. So as far as consultants is concerned, the African Cancer Registry Network visits countries that intend to set up a cancer registry, to do feasibility studies and so forth. So in these pictures, you can see some of the consultancies that were done by the African Cancer Registry Network. We also conduct trainings in the African Cancer Registry Network in various countries within the region. So down there, you've got the pictures of some of the training courses that have been conducted in various parts of the continent. So the main use of data from the African Cancer Registry Network is used by the IAC for estimating a global rates. So the use of the African database updated annually, which is sent to the IAC, was used by the International Agency for Research on Cancer to prepare national estimates of cancer incidence, mortality, and prevalence for GloboCan 2020. And the data also used in the cancer incidence in 5 continent series. So as you can see, data produced within the African Cancer Registry Network after thorough vetting are submitted to the International Agency for Research on Cancer for consideration for inclusion in cancer incidence in 5 continents. So the African Cancer Registry Network reviews the data from all these cancer registries to ensure that the data meets the high quality standards of the cancer incidence in 5 continent series. The African Cancer Registry Network also produces monographs using the data from the membership of the AFCRIN. So Cancer in Sub-Saharan Africa series provides data on cancer incidence from the members of the African Cancer Registry Network. And also another important publication is the Cancer in Childhood in Sub-Saharan Africa. For those who are interested, these publications are available as free downloads on the UICC website and the publications website of the IAC, as well as on the AFCRIN website. So here are some of the activities that were done by the network in 2021. We conducted a training on double staging exercise, and also the National Cancer Registration System building in Tanzania. We assisted in the development of the cancer registry system in Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. And then we also had an activity of childhood cancer registration building in Southern Africa. This involved 5 countries, namely Eswatini, Mozambique, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And also the access to care and treatment of cancer patients in Sub-Saharan Africa. This also involved a number of countries in the region. So we're looking at how accessible treatment and care of cancer patients is like in Sub-Saharan Africa. And also the e-learning project, we also provided training materials for the e-learning project for 2022. I think this is all I have for the African Cancer Registry Network. So in summary, this is a network of cancer registries in Africa. in sub-Saharan Africa, and the aim is to advance the cause of cancer registration in Africa. I thank you.
Some of those activities Eric just some of the activities Eric just described are going to be the subjects of the following talks. So you'll hear a little bit more detail about some of them. And one of them is going to be described by our next speaker, who's Dr. Maïne Evanga, who is a senior epidemiologist in the Institut de Cancérologie in Libreville, Gabon. It's like the National Cancer Institute for Gabon. And Maïne is also responsible for the Gabon Cancer Registry. And she's going to tell us about a project that was looking at barriers and facilities for access to care and treatment of cancer in Africa. Maïne is going to be speaking in French, but her slides are in English, so both our Francophone and Anglophone colleagues can follow, I hope.
Hello, everybody. Could you see my presentation? Is that okay? Could you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear.
Okay.
Please carry on.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Maïne Evanga de l'Institut de Cancérologie de Libreville. The presentation is about access to pediatric cancer care in sub-Saharan Africa. It is a study of the African Cancer Registry Network in collaboration with the Martin Luther University from Germany. Il s'agit d'une étude multicentrique internationale portant sur les freins à l'accessibilité aux soins en cancérologie pédiatrique. On observe de grandes disparités dans les incidences des cancers pédiatriques à travers le monde. 280 000 cas de cancer pédiatrique sont diagnostiqués chaque année. Un enfant atteint de cancer dans les pays à revenus faibles et intermédiaires a 4 fois plus de chances d'en mourir que dans les pays à revenus élevés. Ce qui nous amène à nous poser la question de savoir pourquoi la survie en Afrique subsaharienne est si mauvaise, et plusieurs précédentes études ont montré que les résultats, qu'une large proportion des patients donc se tournent d'abord vers la médecine alternative, donc ce qu'on appelle la médecine traditionnelle, avant de se rendre dans les structures médicales conventionnelles, qu'une grande partie de ces cancers sont diagnostiqués à un stade avancé, que seule une faible proportion des enfants ont accès aux soins, que les différentes modalités de traitement ne sont pas toujours disponibles, et que on note aussi un taux important d'abandon de traitement. Donc, the WHO initiative Cure All, launched in 2018, donc l'initiative Cure All de l'OMS, vise à sauver 1 million de vies d'ici 2030 et en ramenant le taux de survie à environ 60%. Notre étude a pour but de contribuer à cette initiative en faisant l'état des lieux de la situation actuelle, en identifiant les intervenants, en évaluant les capacités, en planifiant et en évaluant les coûts, c'est-à-dire en analysant les besoins et les priorités. Alors, les précédentes études portait essentiellement sur la recherche des raisons de l'abandon de traitement et des retards dans l'accessibilité au traitement. Et dans ces précédentes études ont été mis en cause les croyances reliées au cancer, les contraintes de temps dues aux responsabilités des personnes qui avaient en charge les enfants, la disponibilité donc des traitements et les difficultés de transport et les coûts relatifs aux soins aussi et au transport. Alors, la présente étude, cette étude porte sur tout ce qui facilite ou freine l'initiation des soins, c'est-à-dire elle vise à identifier les raisons qui font que les soins vont débuter ou non. Pour ce faire, on étudie tout ce qui est le background socio-démographique, le parcours thérapeutique qui mène au diagnostic, les freins à l'adhésion aux soins et également à la disponibilité des modalités de traitement, donc comme la radiothérapie, la chirurgie, la chimiothérapie, et on s'intéresse également aux circonstances qui entourent, qui accompagnent le traitement, comme par exemple la prise en charge de la douleur. Alors, c'est une étude qui est réalisée en coopération avec les différents registres africains des cancers. Ici, il s'agit donc d'une étude qui est basée sur les données de registre des populations. Les interviews se font par téléphone et il a fallu faire des adaptations du questionnaire en fonction du contexte local. Ici, on a pris au hasard 240 enfants dans 9 centres différents. Par exemple, ici, on a le registre d'Harare au Zimbabwe, le registre d'Addis Abeba en Éthiopie et notamment le registre de Libreville au Gabon. Alors, les résultats préliminaires de Libreville et d'Addis Abeba ici montrent que on a étudié jusqu'alors 69 enfants âgés de 0 à 19 ans pour un âge médian de 9 ans. On a compté environ 64% de garçons et 36% de filles. Ici, on peut observer que la plupart des enfants la plupart des cancers diagnostiqués chez les enfants étaient des leucémies et des lymphomes et que la plupart des enfants ont reçu une chimiothérapie. Ici, on peut observer la classification des 3 principaux freins identifiés, classés selon la modalité de traitement. On peut observer ici que pour les 3 modalités de traitement, c'est-à-dire la chirurgie, la chirurgie ici, la radiothérapie et la chimiothérapie, la peur et des complications et des effets secondaires et de ses conséquences a constitué la principale barrière à l'initiation du traitement. On observe également que pour la chirurgie, l'état général de l'enfant et les coûts reliés au transport et à la chirurgie ont été également importants. En radiothérapie, également, la disponibilité de la radiothérapie et le manque d'informations relatives aux procédures ont été importants. De la même manière, pour la chimiothérapie aussi, le manque d'informations relatives aux procédures ainsi que l'état général des enfants a constitué l'une des principales barrières. Alors, les limites attendues pour cette étude sont reliées à tout ce qui constitue le manque d'informations cliniques c'est-à-dire ce que l'on ne retrouve pas dans les informations que l'on ne retrouve pas dans nos registres, la désinformation, les incompréhensions et les biais dans les réponses. Lorsque la personne interviewée est une tierce personne, c'est-à-dire une personne qui ne vit pas sous le même toit que l'enfant. Les forces principales de cette étude sont qu'il s'agit d'une étude multicentrique et qui se focalise essentiellement sur tout ce qui facilite et freine l'initiation du traitement. C'est une étude qui est basée sur les populations et elle concerne tous les patients venant à l'hôpital et sont inclus tous les patients qui arrivent à l'hôpital, c'est-à-dire qu'ils aient été traités ou qu'ils n'aient pas été traités. Qu'est-ce que l'on peut apprendre de cette étude qui a été réalisée dans un contexte de Covid? Donc, à l'heure du Covid, cela nous a appris que les études basées sur les interviews téléphoniques sont faisables, que les questionnaires doivent être adaptés en fonction des différentes situations locales. Et étant donné que ça concernait des enfants, une discrétion et des précautions supplémentaires doivent être prises lors des interviews. Les résultats attendus pour cette étude, nous souhaitons obtenir une proportion des enfants atteints de cancer qui accèdent aux soins. La prévalence des éléments et l'identification et la prévalence des éléments qui facilitent ou qui freinent l'initiation du traitement. Donc, ce qui concerne les types de cancer, les modalités de traitement et les sites d'études. Nous souhaitons également identifier des sous-groupes vulnérables et analyser les besoins régionaux. Donc, cette étude, elle est abordée selon la perspective des patients et de leurs familles. Donc, le but est de définir les améliorations qui peuvent être faites dans le traitement des cancers infantiles. Je vous remercie et nous voulons remercier principalement les collaborateurs du Congo, d'Éthiopie, de Côte d'Ivoire, du Mali, du Nigeria, de Tanzanie, d'Ouganda et du Zimbabwe, et Madame Biying et Liu et le docteur Parkin du registre des cancers et toute l'équipe allemande. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Mahine. If you could stop sharing.
Okay. Oops.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that nice, clear presentation. So we don't have time for any questions just now. I think you're supposed to put questions in the box. I'm not sure about that. So we're just going to pass on to the next presentation, which will be by Dr. Yvonne Jokufru. Yvonne is a physician from Cameroon who's just been spending some time studying in the UK. She's just completed her doctorate at the University of Oxford and now is working as a postdoctoral fellow in International Agency for Research on Cancer, where her present task is to analyse the information on survival from the IARC's multinational study for the African Cancer Registry Network members. So, Yvonne, we shall hand over to you to present your data.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parkin and the team, for giving me this opportunity to present my slides today. So today I'll be talking about survival from cancer in sub-Saharan Africa. I want to highlight that this work is a collaborative effort of many of the registries which are members of the African Cancer Registry Network, as well as the International Agency for Research in Cancer. So why do we need population-level cancer survival? This is because population-level cancer survival reflects the overall efficacy of the healthcare system. So it encompasses how efficiently a healthcare system is dealing with early detection, diagnosis, treatment, and right up to palliation. It does not reflect the survival experience of a single hospital, as is the case in many hospital-based survival outcome reports, but it reflects the survival experience of people in a given catchment area, whether or not they make it to any given hospital. Unfortunately, there is very sparse information on population-level cancer survival from low and middle-income countries. So what has been done so far to fill the gap? So far, there have been two multinational studies, including data from sub-Saharan Africa. We have the SURFCAN-2 and the Concord studies, which have included population-level cancer survival data. The SURFCAN-2 study, which is led and coordinated by IARC, was published in 2011, and it included data from 3 African countries, Gambia, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. For the last 10 years, we've not had an update till present, and this is some of the results I'll be presenting today. The Concord 3 study, which was published in 2008, included 5 sub-Saharan African countries, Gambia, Mali, Mauritius, Nigeria, and South Africa. So in total, there have been data published from only 7 sub-Saharan African countries on population-level survival outcomes. We also note we have some hospital-based cohort studies, such as the ABCDO study, which focuses on breast cancer. And we have recently individual papers from the African Cancer Registry Network, which have focused on cancers of the breast, cervix, prostate, colorectal, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I will present some of their findings subsequently. So what's new? So since the last SURFCAN-2 study in 2011, so 10 years later, we want to produce a more up-to-date picture of population-level cancer survival in sub-Saharan Africa. So whereas SURFCAN-2 had 3 countries included, this present SURFCAN-3 studies will include 11 countries and 13 population-based registries in sub-Saharan Africa. We would also have survival data from more cancer sites than has been published previously. So now we'll be presenting data from 22 different cancer sites. And it will be the most recent update of population-level cancer survival in sub-Saharan Africa. So how did we go about this study? First, we obtained approval, ethical clearance and approval from the local registries, from the research committee of the AFCRN, and from IARC. The follow-up, these patients were selected randomly. So a random selection of patients from population-based registries in Africa was selected. Follow-up was mainly active in many of these registries, except for the island nations of Mauritius and Seychelles, where we could do some passive follow-up. What does active follow-up include? It entails like going through the patient clinical records, tracing these records, and updating the vital status of patients. So updating whether or not these patients are alive or dead at closing date from the patient records. If the vital status is not available on the patient records, and if we have a mobile number either of the patient or the next of kin, these are contacted such that we have a more up-to-date picture of whether the patient is alive or dead at the close of the study. Some of these patients in these registries were followed up till 2017. So in total, in our data set, we had approximately 12,500 cases. Of these 12,500 cases, we included 10,500 for survival analysis. Approximately 1,500 cases were excluded because we did not have information on survival time following diagnosis. And we excluded a further 381 cases from smaller cancer sites, so with less than 10 cases, for example, by cancer type. This map shows the countries which were represented in our study. So far we have 11 countries from Western, from Eastern, from Southern Africa, and we also have the island nations of Mauritius and Seychelles, which are included. In terms of the number of cases included for survival analysis, this closely reflects the incidence burden observed in sub-Saharan Africa. The most number of patients included were patients with cancers of the breast and cervix, which are the most common cancers in sub-Saharan Africa, for which we had approximately 2,000 cases included for survival analysis. We also had cancers of the colorectum, the prostate, and the esophagus. We also have smaller sites with under 200 cases, but which provide valuable information on population-level survival data from Africa for these cancer sites. For example, for cancers of the thyroid, pancreas, brain, and nervous system. What about the sex distribution? In our cohort, given that the majority of cancers, as we saw, about 4,000 cancers were cancers of the breast and cervix, 64% of our cohort were female and 36% were male. In terms of the age at diagnosis, the mean age at diagnosis for women was 54.3 years, while for males, this was 70 years. Looking at the age distribution by cancer type, we see that for the most common cancers in women, cancers of the breast and cancers of the cervix, we notice that the majority, like the greatest proportion of patients under the age of 55. So the first two bars represent, the first bar are patients age 15 to 44, and the second patients age 45 to 54. So for the most common cancers in women, breast and cervix, most of these patients are diagnosed under age 55, hence the mean age of about 54 years for female cancers. Meanwhile, for the most common cancers in men, which is cancer of the prostate, most of the patients are seen above age 65 as expected, hence a higher mean age of diagnosis among men. What is the overall survival for patients with cancers in our setting? So 5 years, the observed overall survival, which is not adjusted for anything, was at 39% at 5 years. So we see at the beginning of our cohort, we had 10,500 patients. At the end of the 5 years, we had 2,000 patients alive. So with corresponding to a survival probability of 39%. Looking at survival differences by sex, we noticed that females had a slightly better survival outcome at 5 years than males. And this difference, this is unadjusted overall survival, but this difference was significant on the log rank test. When we look at this survival by age at diagnosis, the first three curves represent people aged 15 to 44, 45 to 54, and 55 to 64. They have slightly better survival outcomes than the oldest patients. This is observed unadjusted survival. Now, looking at survival differences by the Human Development Index, for patients from richer countries, so countries with a high Human Development Index, in our study represented by Mauritius and Seychelles, they had much better survival outcomes than patients from poorer countries, which were the majority of countries, so countries from low and middle income settings. I want to highlight that the country from medium income setting in this case was South Africa, but we included patients from the Eastern Cape Cancer Registry. Majority of these patients were from the Eastern Cape Cancer Registry, and this does not necessarily reflect the overall survival experience from the entire South African Republic. Looking at survival by stage at diagnosis for breast cancer, so this is from a publication of the AFCRN, which was produced in 2019. Patients diagnosed at early stages have better survival outcomes than patients diagnosed late. But I also want to highlight that for more than 50% of these patients, we did not know the stage at diagnosis. And for these patients, we observed that their survival outcome is somewhere between patients diagnosed early and patients diagnosed late, although closer to the patients diagnosed at more advanced stages. When we look at survival by stage for cancer of the cervix, these are results still from the AFCRN published in 2020. We observe a similar picture in which patients seen earlier have better survival outcomes compared to patients late. But cervical cancer, similar to breast cancer, although we did our best to get up-to-date information on stage, for more than 50% of these patients, we did not know the stage at diagnosis. A similar picture emerges when we look at cancers of the prostate. This is still work from the AFCRN published in 2011. So the blue line represents patients seen at stage 1 and 2, while the gray line shows patients diagnosed with stage 4 disease. What we have in red are the patients for whom the stage of diagnosis is not known, and we still see it somewhere between those with early and those with late stage. So for colorectal cancer, for a majority of patients, we do not have enough data on the stage of diagnosis. But once more, we see that being diagnosed early compared to being diagnosed late is associated with better survival outcomes. Looking at the overall survival, like what is like the overall relative survival. So the relative survival differs from the observed survival because the relative survival compares the survival probability seen in our cohort to the background. So it adjusts for differences in the background mortality for the different countries represented in this registry. So we see some cancers of relatively good prognosis, for example, cancers of the thyroid, where we see at 1 year the relative survival is approximately 90% for cancers, Hodgkin's disease. But I also want you to highlight that for some of these cancers, we have relatively wide confidence intervals because there were fewer number of cases. But if I go down to the end of the spectrum, 1 year after diagnosis, the survival experience for patients with esophageal cancer, which is very common in some hotspots in Africa, is only 34%, while the survival from liver cancer is approximately 27% after 1 year. Looking at the survival 5 years after diagnosis, we see that the survival experience for patients with thyroid cancer is close to 78.1%. Kaposi sarcoma is about 67.6%, which is mostly driven as well by HIV status and HIV treatment. When we look at the most common cancers, for example, breast and prostate cancer, 5-year survival is close to 60% in sub-Saharan Africa. But at the end of the spectrum, we also see relatively poor survival outcomes as expected from cancers of the liver, where it's about 13.6 after 5 years, from the esophagus, which is about 17.5% after 5 years, and from the lung, which is less than 30% after 5 years. So in summary, I'd like to say cancer affects women at slightly younger ages than observed among men in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is related to the most common cancers we observed in sub-Saharan Africa. Cancer survival differs by the cancer type, by the stage of diagnosis, and by access to care, with HCI as a proxy. So this results in differences in survival observed across the sub-Saharan African continent. Unfortunately, we do not have stage of diagnosis for about 50% of patients with the most common cancers. So this is why the essential TNM is quite important in these settings. And later in this session, we're going to have more on this staging. And finally, I want to highlight that population-based cancer registries are pivotal for generating data on population-level survival outcomes and for monitoring the entire cancer care pathway. We had some challenges, for example, inadequate data, like loss to follow-up for some patients. But I want to highlight that in spite of these challenges, these data generated from population-based registries are necessary and essential to benchmark and to monitor the cancer survival progress in our settings. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. And thank you all for keeping beautifully to time. Thank you, Yvonne. That's really excellent, clear, to the point, and spot on time. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to our next speaker now, who's going to be describing one of the other projects that Eric mentioned as an activity of the African Cancer Registry Network. The speaker is Natasha Abraham, who's a scientist at the National Cancer Registry of South Africa. The South African Cancer Registry is just about to become a collaborating centre of IARC for paediatric cancer registration. And thanks largely to the work of Natasha, who's going to tell us about a preliminary project now creating a network of pediatric cancer registries in Southern Africa. So Natasha, if you're ready, you can share your screen and off you go.
Just want to check everyone can hear me and see my screen.
Perfect.
Great. Okay, so thank you for joining me today.
Not sharing screen yet.
I'm not?
No, not yet. That's it.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, great. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Natasha Abraham, and I'll be presenting on the childhood cancer surveillance in Southern Africa. Childhood cancers are defined as cancers diagnosed in children aged 0 to 14 years old. In Africa, population-level data on childhood cancers is sparse and incomplete, particularly on staging and coding. And as you can imagine, this poses a problem as we need reliable numbers for the planning and evaluation of cancer services for the region. Previously, the African Cancer Registry Network successfully established national registration of childhood cancers within cancer registries in 3 countries, as shown here in the different shades of red. Those were Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and Republic of Congo. And what we aimed to do was similar. We aimed to establish national childhood cancer programs to strengthen the childhood cancer surveillance within 5 Southern African countries. And they are shown here in green. So those are South Africa, Eswatini, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. So our objectives was to ensure that there were dedicated staff trained for childhood cancer registration within the registries, and that we collected accurate data on cancer incidence and cancer stage at diagnosis. Treatment and outcome information was collected where possible. And this work was funded by the African Oxford Research Development Award that was successfully awarded to the National Cancer Registry of South Africa and the University of Oxford. Our funding period was from August 2020 to July 2021. So 11 months, quite a short study period, and in the middle of the pandemic, so it did pose us some challenges. And the first one being is that we had to pivot our original in-person training to an online format very quickly. The training content covered introduction to childhood cancers and, of course, the Toronto staging. And the main activities of this project were to identify sources of data and to collect the incidence data. So all childhood cancers for the years 2018 to 2019 were retrospectively captured and staged. I do want to point out for Zambia, we focused on the years 2019 to 2020, and for Eswatini, we did it for 2016 to 2020 because their population is quite small. And information on treatment and vital status were collected as of the end of 31st December 2020, where possible. We used Tier 1 of the Toronto Staging Guidelines because that's what's used in the African continent. Now, before I go through the results, I do want to just point out that although we had various regional registries included in the project, for the purpose of this presentation, we focused on just the Maputo Registry for Mozambique, the Lusaka Registry for Zambia, and for South Africa, we piloted it on the pediatric notifications that are sent in by clinicians. So looking at the results, it's not very clear here, but generally the distribution of the childhood cancers mostly fell between the ICC category of 1A and 6A. So let's look at some of the most common cancers across the region in a bit more detail. So in South Africa and Mozambique, lymphoid leukemia were the most common cancers, whereas in Zambia, retinoblastoma was the most common cancer. Nephroblastoma was the most common cancer in Zimbabwe, and in Eswatini, unspecified leukemias were the most common cancer. Both nephroblastoma and retinoblastoma were common across the region. And I also want to point out that Kaposi sarcoma was one of the most common cancer in Eswatini and Mozambique. Now, looking into the results in a bit more detail, we found that almost 60% of all the lymphoid leukemia cancers occurred in males. But most importantly, close to 85% of all the lymphoid leukemias could not be staged. Now, we know that information of the central nervous system and the bone marrow is important to stage leukemias. And so for about 85% of the cases, we just weren't able to do that. For retinoblastoma, close to 89% of all the cases occurred in the age group 0 to 4 years old. Similarly, nephroblastoma, 71% of all the cases occurred in the age group 0 to 4 years old. What we did find was that more than 80% of all retinoblastoma, nephroblastoma, and rhabdomyosarcoma cases could be staged. I do want to point out that Eswatini and Mozambique data were excluded from this table because their numbers were too low. Now, looking at the staging in a bit more detail, as I mentioned, 85% of the lymphoid leukemia cases didn't have enough information to be staged, so they were left out. For retinoblastoma, most of the cases were diagnosed at metastatic stage. However, when we did look at it in detail, we did find that there were some regional differences. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, most of the cases were diagnosed at the metastatic stage, whereas in South Africa, most of the retinoblastoma cases were diagnosed at the localized stage. For the renal tumors and rhabdomyosarcomas, most of them were diagnosed at the localized stage. In terms of treatment and follow-up, information on treatment were particularly hard to find, especially where the medical records were on paper form and they were stored in different systems or in different areas of the clinics. Our staff had trouble accessing these medical records due to COVID-19 restrictions and lockdown. But we do know that active follow-up is possible with additional resources. So in conclusion, National Childhood Cancer Registration is feasible and it's cost-effective when it's incorporated within an existing population-based cancer registry. Tailored training on staging can effectively enable cancer registrars to code stage on childhood cancers, but clinicians need to be included so they can provide sufficient information on staging, treatment, and cancer so that we can strengthen the surveillance of childhood cancers. I do want to give a special thanks to all our collaborators for their incredible dedication and hard work in setting up these childhood cancer registries, particularly in light of all the COVID-19 restrictions that we had. So a very big congratulations to them. And I'd also like to acknowledge the following institutions and individuals for their contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Natasha. That's a nice, clear presentation and well in time. We're a little bit ahead of time even. That's almost unheard of in multi-presenter sessions. I'm not sure if we're going to offer a little bit of time for talks at the end, but I think as we're a little bit early, we'll just continue on. Eric, can I hand over to you to introduce the next speakers?
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Gisbert Msigwa. Mr. Msigwa is with the Ministry of Health of Tanzania and is going to talk about cancer registration in Tanzania. Over to you, Mr. Msigwa.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for the introduction. I will be presenting this on behalf of the cancer registration team, which is working in the mainland of Tanzania. As part of the introduction, the Ministry of Health, Community Development, Gender, Elderly and Children has established 5 population-based cancer registries which are functional across the country. This helps the Ministry of Health in systematic and continuous process of registering every case of cancer diagnosis of a given period in a well-defined geographical region. As I said before, we do have 5 functional population-based cancer registries across the country. The first one is Kilimanjaro Population-Based Cancer Registry, which is located on the northern part of the country at Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center. Mwanza Population-Based Cancer Registry is located at the Lake Zone part of the country. It is at Bugando Medical Center. We also have Mbeya Population-Based Cancer Registry, which is located at the Southern Highlands part of the country, which is at Mbeya Zonal Referral Hospital. On the central part of the country, we do have Dodoma Cancer Population-Based Cancer Registry, which is at Benjamin Mkapa Hospital. The last one, but not least, is the one which is located at the eastern part of the country, which is Dar es Salaam Population-Based Cancer Registry, which is at Ocean Road Cancer Institute. We do have various goals of cancer registration in a country. The first one is to establish and strengthen the national population-based cancer registry leadership, as well as the infrastructure. To provide the site-specific support for improving registry functioning, analysis and collection of information across the country through effective cancer registration and surveillance. To monitor and evaluate cancer registry services at all levels, at all healthcare system levels. The other one is to conduct cancer research and produce publications from cancer registry data. Not only that, but also provide regular reports that are needed by high-level authorities of the Ministry of Health, that is from various departments, agencies, and other directorates as well. Since when we started strengthening cancer registration in a country, in the year 2017, when Bloomberg Data for Health initiative came in, we have attained various achievements. I would love to categorize them into 2 parts, which are development of the registries and the policy influence, as well as research. On development of researches, the Ministry of Health has been able to train 28 staff, that is 22 males and 60 females on cancer registration. Categorically, we have been able to train directors from our registries, registrars, as well as some of the staff from the central part of the ministry, that is Directorate of Policy and Planning, as well as the Directorate of Curative Services. The 2 population-based cancer registries, that is Mwanza and Kilimanjaro, are full members of AFCRN, where Dodoma was granted the provisional membership in the year 2020. The Ministry of Health has also been insisting that registries should be using the government-employed registrars to run cancer registration activity. And this is to enhance on sustainability as well as institutionalization, especially when the donors phase out in sponsoring various activities in the country. This has been well achieved across all registries, with an exception of Mwanza registry, whereby we do have one experienced registrar, which the Ministry of Health is using him to provide mentorship to the rest of the registries. As you can even see on the photo, this was Mr. Franco, who traveled from Mwanza population-based cancer registry and went to Dar es Salaam population-based cancer registry to provide a technical support there. On policy influence and research, we do have some of the indicators with cancer registration data, which have been included in the 2019 and 2020 annual health sector performance profile report. This is a very core and famous report in the country, which is produced every year. The report includes key indicators that have been selected by the Ministry of Health. The indicators are used to assess the progress of the health sector strategic plan 4, the one that ended last year, and as of now, we will be able to assess the health sector strategic plan 5 by next year. So we are hoping to keep on using the indicators from cancer registration side. The ministry has been able to develop the cancer registry strategic plan for the year 2019 and 2022. It has also been able to come up with a costing of cancer registration projecting that has enabled us to come up with the first version of the costing manual as well as the costing tool. The results from the 4 registries allowed a more accurate picture of cancer profile in the country. And this is according to IACS Global Can for the year 2022. We can see that for the population of over 59 million people from Tanzania mainland, for the year 2020, we had new cases, cancer cases for males of about 15,299. And for females, we had 25,165. The age standardized incidence rate for males was 119.7, and for females was 151.1. Having done all these investments, the Ministry of Health is aiming at continuing doing investments to make sure that cancer data is available for the Ministry of Health to make various decision making. Saying so, we are aiming at doing the following. The first one is to establish the Central Coordination Office, which its main function is going to be overseeing all cancer registration activities. And we are aiming at the Cancer Registration Coordination Office is going to be positioned under the NCD section within the Directorate of Curative Services. The Coordination Office is going to work closely with the Directorate of Policy and Planning under the section of Monitoring and Evaluation. We are also aiming at creating a central database, which is going to be embedded into DHIS2. DHIS2 is the software which has been agreed by the Ministry of Health as well as the stakeholders to be used in collecting health statistics from different health facilities across the country. So we are aiming at integrating the database with other systems like civil registration and vital statistics system, the verbal autopsy manager, the one of which we are rolling out throughout the country, which is helping us to collect data from the community. We are aiming at disseminating cancer registration data through the national health reports, such as the National Vital Statistics Report, the one that is going to be produced this year as the second report, whereby the first one we produced last year. The other one is the annual health sector performance profile, the one that I described before. And the last one is the annual statistical tables and figures that gives us the statistics from lower level, that is cancer level and facility level. We will keep on running the 5 population-based cancer registries together with the Central Coordination Office. As part of the initiative in the country, we are facing various challenges, and we therefore come up with various recommendations to make us overcome such challenges. The first one is that cancer registration database is not integrated with other systems, as we had seen before, and the systems are like the DHIS2. So as of now, the Ministry of Health has started the early initiatives of integrating the systems through prioritizing key indicators which are going to feed some of the selected data or information from the CANREC database into DHIS2. And the integration is going to be attained through the health information mediator. We also do have unsustainable financial resources. This is one of the problems which is pulling back various registries, whereby most of them were financially and are still being financially supported by donors like Bloomberg Data for Health Initiative. The Ministry of Health is keeping on encouraging the registries to include their budgets or the budgets of activities from the revenues that are being collected within the respective hospitals. We do have temporarily registrars from some of the registries, and these are not the government employees. And the best examples we see from one's a population-based cancer registry, and the other one is Kilimanjaro. But the Ministry of Health is encouraging the registries to deploy the government officials as registrars so as to enhance the sustainability of cancer registration work in the country. So that's all. Thank you so much. Asanteni sana.
Okay, and our last presenter is Ms. Bing Liu. Bing is with the African Cancer Registry Network and is the administrator there in the African Cancer Registry Network. Bing is going to talk about staging with essential TNM in African registries. This is a simplified version of the TNM system, tailor-made for registrars within cancer registries in developing countries, particularly those in Africa. Over to you, Bing.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for staying for the session. This is the last talk of this session. I will try to keep it short and sweet. Before I start, I would like to thank all the participating member registries and our donors. Without any of them, none of these projects you just listened to would be possible. And as much of the background information already given in the previous talks, so I will just repeat some of the key points. I will just reshare some of the slides again. Seems to be not quite right.
Is Eric still sharing his screen?
Sorry, the program just crashed, so I'm going to reshare again. All good? So, as stated and evident in Yvonne's talk, the information on stage of diagnosis is fundamentally important for any rational cancer control planning. But it is largely missing in the cancer surveillance data in the sub-Saharan Africa. For the reasons given in Natasha's talk, much of the information on stage is not present in the medical records. It's either due to lack of diagnostic facilities or opportunities. Even if it is stated, it's not always clear that which staging system was used by the clinicians. There are many staging systems used across the disciplines. For example, the Duke's staging system for colorectal cancers, FIGO's for female cancers, the International Retinoblastoma staging system for retinoblastoma, etc., etc. So what is it used? We don't always know. That makes the information less useful while we want to use it. And in many of Yvonne's talk gave extensive information on the importance of survival on stage, influencing survival. I'm just going to show another two examples. We can see that the patients with early stage disease or localized disease are diagnosed. They tend to have a much better survival compared to the patients with advanced or with metastases are diagnosed. Especially for children with bone cancers. If the child was diagnosed with a localized cancer, the chance of surviving at the end of 5 years is 90%. And if the child was diagnosed with metastases, so only 1/3 of the children would be still alive at the end of 5 years. And that's threefold. So if what we wanted is not available on the table, we think that maybe our registrars could do something to change the situation. Within the African network, we promote the use of essential TNM for staging adult cancers. Essential TNM is a condensed version of the full TNM. The full TNM staging system is developed and published by the UICC staging group. Essential TNM is composed of 3 key components, that is T, N, and M. T is the extent of invasions and or size of the tumor. N is node involvement. M is the metastasis involvement, yes or no, presence or absence. Here's an example of the flow chart for the cancer of the breast. The abstractions of the categories of essential TNM is done using flowchart. The flowchart has decision points that is shown in the diamond shapes with answers yes and no. And following the direction, you will reach the oval decision point or the stop point. And once the oval is reached, following one or more decisions, the coding process stops. Sufficient information to put the cases into one of the TNM stage groups, 1 to 4, that is the middle column there, will have been obtained. So if you follow the flow chart, you will be able to reach one of these stage groups eventually, if the information is there. And each cancer has its own flow chart. And this special menu contains flowcharts for 8 cancer sites commonly seen in Africa. For childhood cancers, we promote the use of Toronto Stage Guideline Tier 1. This is because to suit the healthcare system and the capacity of the registries in Africa. This manual endorses a 2-tiered approach that provides less detailed criteria for the registries with limited resources and data access. Again, here's an example of the acute lymphoblastic lymphoma. As mentioned by Natasha during her talk, some of these diagnostic facilities is not available or the opportunity is not there for the patients. So even with the guideline present, sometimes staging these cases may not be feasible on the continent. So as early as 2016, AFCRN recognized the need of enhancing the information on stage within its database. A pilot study took place in 3 African countries, that is Uganda, Malawi, and Cote d'Ivoire. This exercise asked the registrars and the clinicians to stage the same set of the clinical cases, and the comparisons of the discrepancies between the 2 sets of scores was studied carefully. Because it was a pilot study, so only 4 adult cancers were concerned. And during the exercise, these are the 2 examples of the results. We realized if there's no difference between the 2 sets of scores, the number of cases will appear in the yellow groups. And if the registrars overstaged the cases, they appear in pink. Understage appear in blue. And from the results, you can see that the registrars tend to understage the cases. After looking at it carefully, we realized that without proper trainings, the registrars fail to recognize the descriptions of node involvements and metastases presence. So move on to the next steps. We developed and prepared more specific training materials and established a first library for staging exercise for the registrars. This was one special training took place in Ethiopia 2018. 15 registrars from 12 countries attended the training. At present, we are running a more advanced and comprehensive training project, staging project. We aim to cover we aim to train all registrars within the network. And the project will cover extended to 8 adult cancers and 6 childhood cancers, which are commonly seen in Africa. The project has 3 steps: training and exercise. And after that, we evaluate the results from the exercise. For training, we have developed all the training materials in 3 languages: English, French, and Portuguese. Courses will be given in English and French only for now. Due to travel restrictions, the training courses were given via Zoom. Ideally, all these courses should be delivered in person, allowing the registrars to communicate among each other or to ask questions freely. The next steps, these trained registrars will have the opportunity to stage some of the clinical cases from the library. By now, the staging library has been expanded to over 200 cases of adult cancers and 180 childhood cancers. Once the registrars have done their exercise, we will collect the scores and compare them to the golden scores, which is scored by the clinicians. Similar evaluation methods will be performed as we've seen in the phase 1 studies. And based on that, we can evaluate the training courses, the outcome of the training courses we provided. It's still too early to give any concrete conclusion on this project. But we are expecting to see that more training will be needed in the near future. And we are hoping to see that registrars will succeed in staging more cancer cases during their routine data abstractions. Everything we do now is for a better future. We believe that with more attention and effort, we will expect to see a rising percentage of cases recorded with stage within the African surveillance database. So that's all from my talk. Some of this material will be repeated in our next network talks. If you are interested, please jot down this registration link, and you can register yourself for our next talks. Thank you very much. Miami, would you like to take over from here if there's any question?
Okay. Yeah. For now, I haven't seen any questions yet. Max, can you come in, please?
Not sure if our facilitator has access to the chat box if anybody's posted any questions.
Yeah, no. Usually, hello, Christine.
So there are questions available on the main platform. I'm going to look.
So thank you very much. So Max and Naomi, there are some questions. I'm not sure whether you can see it on your side in the question and answer tab.
No.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose the questions to you, and perhaps we have about 8 minutes before the close of the session. So perhaps very briefly, for the sake of the delegates that have joined us, these could be answered. So I'm going to go through some of the questions very quickly that have come through. There was one of the questions that have been posed to the panel by one of the delegates, firstly. So how do we account for patients who have changed care providers but were declared censored? Then for those that have passed on, how do you confirm that it was due to the cancer and not from any other comorbidity? And other factors like health system issues, type and molecular subtypes, etc., will also contribute to survival overall. So maybe we can just answer that very briefly, succinctly, so then we can move on to the next one.
Maybe Yvonne, you can deal with this one.
Yes, I'll just start by saying for patients lost to follow-up, first we try to contact patients by phone as well. So we did not just look at like medical records, but we also try to see if patients could be contacted on their mobile phone. So even if they had changed provider, where this was available, and we will call them, and so we'll be able to know what is the vital status of the patient. But I also want to highlight that this study is retrospectively, like the data is retrospectively collected. So for some patients, they may have changed numbers or changed addresses. So even though we did our best to contact these patients by checking records, by calling them, and in some cases by home visits, sometimes we would still not be able to have the data on their vital status at closing date. Hence reasons for the loss to follow-up. But I want to highlight that this loss to follow-up was differential by registries. Some registries, for example, Zimbabwe had very good follow-up data, while loss to follow-up was higher in other registries. As concerns if the patient died from other cancers, that's why we also presented what we call the relative survival. So the relative survival is it's best suited for circumstances in which we do not have the exact cause of death, which is in the case for almost all registries in our context, except for South Africa, which has good vital statistics. So in this case, we use the relative survival, which compares the survival experience in a cohort of cancer patients to the survival experience of patients in the general population without a cancer. So by so doing, we take out the need of knowing the exact cause of cancer, but we can compare what is the excess mortality from cancer in comparison with a patient without the cancer of the same age or sex. Thank you very much.
Next question that we have, which was for Eric, a great overview on the network. There's quite a number of registries that have now become part of the network, and it's great to see that the network is growing. However, the observation has been that data from only 6 of the registries that have recently been included in the latest volume of the cancer incidence in 5 continents. What does this tell us?
Eric, are you going to reply or do you want me to do something?
Yeah, yes. It's of great concern to us in the African Cancer Registry Network, particularly some of us who have been in this area of cancer registration and surveillance for a long time. It shows that the quality of the data that some of our registry produce is not of very good quality. So that's the reason why this network was established, to try and improve, the quality of data produced by the population-based cancer registries. So indeed, it's a cause of concern. We hope that we might have more countries in the upcoming volume 12 of cancer incidence in 5 continents. It's really a cause of concern to us in the network. Thank you.
Okay. So those are the questions that have come through. I think there were other questions that had come through, and they have been responded to on the Q&A by the different presenters. So if there's nothing further, I'm not sure. We do have a few more minutes, so I'm not sure, Sophia or Max, if there's anything else that from the presenters, if there's anything else that you might want to just elaborate on or bring through. One of the things that I just wanted to ask, I think, it's really great to see the network growing, and I think what has come through quite succinctly is the value of data in Africa and how important it is for us to continue these efforts to grow the network and also to improve on our data quality. But certainly, I think the capacity issue in terms of our human capacity and also the issues around funding to grow the networks. Is there any comments in how do we sustain these efforts? Because certainly, funds are becoming even more scarce as we have competing priorities. And how do you see the network going forward in terms of building capacity for registries, but also building the number of registries in terms of growing the different data sources for the continent?
Okay, well, thank you, Vikram. Well, as far as the network itself is concerned, what the future is, we don't know. Of course, the network itself relies on funding from external donors. It's, as Eric said in his talk, the network is part of the IARC Global Initiative for Cancer Registry Development, and IARC has been very careful to provide funding for the network as well as some other donors. So the work of the network itself in coordinating, training, assisting, giving technical advice to registries and so on is indeed supported by donor funds, but the registries themselves don't receive any funding to run their routine operations for the very reason that we've said many times is this makes the whole issue non-sustainable. The registries have to be self-supporting. Gisbert mentioned himself that within Tanzania, the project that he described within Tanzania has had external funding, and of course they're very conscious that is something that won't go on forever, and the registries in Tanzania have to be encouraged to look to the future and have their own funding. And we've done that consistently with the members of the network. They don't receive funding from the network itself for their routine activities. The long-term future of the network, of course, the network exists in this strange format with its secretariat here in Oxford because it was always difficult to find one super centre in Africa that could do all this work when they were busy with the routine work of registration. But in future, I mentioned briefly that we shall be working with IARC to start some collaborating centres in Africa that will take over some of the coordination work. And as I mentioned, the South African Register will become responsible for coordinating the work of paediatric cancer registries in Africa. The registries in Kenya will become the coordinating centres for training, and the registry in Côte d'Ivoire will help with the technical support to the Francophone registry. So some of our work that Being and I have been doing here in Oxford will be gradually devolved to collaborating centres, and we hope that will give the network a long-term sustainability as well, when eventually everything won't be done from a single coordinating centre. So I hope that gives a brief outline of how things are working and how we see the future.
Much, Max, for that insight. Well, there you have it, delegates. If there are any funders out there listening to this session, it's really worthwhile putting funds into the Cancer Registry Network. As I said at the beginning of the session, think of cancer, everything about cancer on a plane flying over Africa without a radar. No data, you're flying blind. So please invest your funds in data because it reflects on where we've come from and where we are heading. So once again, really delightful session, very insightful, and it shows us the capacity of what we can do if we have data.